You know, when we think of Jamestown, we usually picture the beginning of a nation, right? A story of survival against all odds. But what if I told you its origin story is a lot closer to a high-risk startup? We're talking investors, a seriously flawed business plan, and even a hostile takeover.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1608, deep in the Virginia woods. An English captain, a guy named Christopher Newport, is trying to put a crown on the head of Powhatan, who's the incredibly powerful leader of a whole confederacy of Native American tribes. This crown? It's a gift from King James I of England. But, as Captain John Smith kind of dryly put it was not going well.
Yeah, this wasn't exactly a celebration. It was a super awkward ceremony born from a massive cultural misunderstanding. It was a power play, plain and simple, and the whole thing was going down in the middle of the North American wilderness.
So what you're seeing here is this total clash of worldviews. From the English perspective, they were offering a gift, a symbol of an alliance, making Powhatan a sort of subject king under their own King James. But Powhatan, he saw it completely differently. In his world, powerful leaders received tribute. They didn't kneel to anyone. He knew that kneeling was an act of submission. It's the exact same thing he made the chiefs he conquered do.
So what happened? Well, it literally came down to physical force. The English captains had to actually lean hard on Powhatan's shoulders just to get him to bend a little bit, enough so they could jam the crown on his head. I mean, this one moment just perfectly captures the tension of the whole situation. Two powers, each trying to impose their own rules on the other.
This whole strange episode just begs a bigger question, right? Who was this Captain Newport anyway? He wasn't just some random guy sailing around. He was following orders. So, whose orders? Who was funding this incredibly risky venture into the unknown?
Well, it turns out Captain Newport was an employee, and the entity pulling the strings wasn't the English crown, at least not directly. It was a corporation, a for-profit company with its headquarters back in London.
So, let me introduce you to the Virginia Company of London. And really, the best way to think of it is like a 17th century startup. It was a joint stock company, which basically means they sold shares to investors to raise the huge amount of cash needed to set up a settlement. The goal wasn't to build a new nation, it was all about turning a profit for the shareholders.
And for 12 pounds and 10 shillings, which by the way was a ton of money back then, anyone from a rich merchant to a regular tradesman could buy one share of stock. And just like that, you became an adventurer, an investor betting big on this new American enterprise.
So what was the business plan these adventurers were funding? Well, to put it mildly, it was wildly optimistic. They were hoping to find a quick sea route to Asia, discover massive gold mines like the Spanish had, and just generally exploit all the natural resources they could find. But here's the key thing. The original idea was for a commercial outpost, a trading post, not a permanent colony with families and farms. But yeah, about that business plan, it failed. And not just a little bit. It failed miserably. There was no shortcut to Asia. There was no gold. The colony was just burning through cash and losing people left and right. So the company had a choice: give up or pivot hard.
With that dream of finding gold totally dead in the water, the company desperately needed a new product, a cash crop, something that could finally make the colony profitable. And that product turned out to be tobacco. The future of Virginia wasn't glittering with gold, it was literally going up in smoke.
And this pivot to tobacco changed everything. I mean, just look at this timeline. The colony completely transforms from a simple trading post into something way more complex. See, to grow tobacco, you need people on the ground, working permanently, people who have a real stake in the success. So the company starts granting private land. And to manage this new growing society, they create a system of self-government with something called the Great Charter, which established the very first representative assembly in North America.
And get this, where were these massive society-shaping decisions being made? Not in Virginia. They were being made thousands of miles away in a London boardroom. This right here is a page from the company's own court book. It's in records like these that we see the executives debating and passing the policies on land and government that would, pretty much by accident, lay the groundwork for a whole new kind of society. But you know how it goes, right? Success often brings a whole new set of problems. This big strategic shift and the growing importance of the colony led to some serious political infighting back at the London headquarters. The company basically started tearing itself apart from the inside.
You essentially had two powerful factions emerge. On one side was Sir Edwin Sandys. He was all in on this new model of a permanent, expanding colony with its own government.
On the other side, you had the Earl of Warwick's crew, who were much more interested in quick profits and keeping tight control from London. Their visions for what Virginia should be were just completely at odds.
And we're not talking about polite debates here. The company's own records describe how their board meetings just devolved into shouting matches full of slander and accusations. All this constant fighting completely paralyzed the company, distracting them from the actual job of managing the colony.
Now, all of this chaos did not go unnoticed. King James I, the guy who charted the company to begin with, started getting really alarmed. He saw the mismanagement, he saw the horrific death toll in the colony, and he saw the company getting a little too big for its britches politically. He decided it was time to step in.
And he did it methodically. This was a hostile corporate takeover executed by the Crown. First, he launched investigations. Then, he ordered his counsel to seize all of the company's records, every letter, every book. Next, his lawyers issued something called a writ of quo warranto, which is a fancy legal term that basically means, by what authority do you exist? And finally, in 1624, the court sided with the king, revoked the charter, and dissolved the Virginia Company for good.
And here's the ultimate irony. The company's own incredibly detailed records, the very books they kept to run their business, became the main evidence used against them. Their entire history of infighting, mismanagement, and financial failure was all right there in their own handwriting. It gave the king all the ammo he needed to shut them down.
So the Virginia Company failed. After 18 years, it was bankrupt and gone. As a business, it was a complete disaster. But its story doesn't end there. Because in its failure, the company left behind this incredible and probably completely unintentional legacy.
In its desperate scramble to turn a profit, the company introduced ideas that became cornerstones of American society. Just think about it. Private land ownership for regular people, a government where colonists actually had a say, a system of local courts. These weren't grand ideas from a benevolent king. They were business decisions made by a struggling corporation trying to stay afloat.
And that's the whole point, really. The company itself died, but the society it had accidentally created, one based on private property, tobacco, and a little bit of self-rule, that society survived and thrived. Virginia became a royal colony, sure, but it was built on a corporate foundation.
It leaves us with this really fascinating question to chew on. We talk a lot about American ideals like liberty and freedom. But when you look right back at the very beginning, at Jamestown, you find a story driven by profit margins, shareholder value, and corporate strategy. It kind of forces you to ask, how much of the American story has always been, at its very core, a business story?